Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're opening up the files on a man who seems to make a habit of cheating death. The thing is, it's never his own.
We are looking at the truly astounding case of Jim Ironheart. He's this figure who materializes, seconds before a disaster almost anywhere in the world. He's, he's a modern savior, but a highly trained and profoundly wounded one.
Right. I mean, if you wanted to build a case study of functional madness, but a madness driven by, pure, unadulterated trauma, Jim Ironheart would be your guy.
He absolutely would.
And our way into this story is one of his most recent rescues, a near tragedy in Boston. A little boy, Nicky O'Connor. Jim was there. He stopped an explosion in a building that would have killed Nicky and several other people.
And at first glance, you might think, okay, lucky break. A hero is in the right place. But when you start to dig into the data, you see a pattern. This isn't just luck. This is one of 14 life and death rescues he has pulled off in just 6 months.
All across the continental United States, it's an unbelievable pattern.
So our mission today is to follow the investigation, a really meticulous and frankly painful investigation by a reporter named Thorne. We're going to trace Ironheart's baffling movements.
And these movements they're just all over the place. He's propelled by this invisible force from the blistering August heat of Southern California all the way to the dreary coast of Portland, Oregon.
And then deep into the Mojave Desert, which is just about as hostile and unforgiving as it gets. And ultimately, we end up at a remote, and I mean deeply haunted, farm in the San Ynez Valley.
The sources we're pulling from today are incredibly rich. We have firsthand accounts of the rescues themselves. We have Holly's own exhaustive investigative notes and some deeply personal recollections that eventually peel back the layers on Jim's unbelievable, almost magical clairvoyance.
But we need to establish the core mystery right up front. Jim Ironheart is a walking contradiction. He moves with this exceptional physical grace. He's soft-spoken, but every single muscle, every glance, it all suggests he is constantly prepared for mortal combat.
He's gentle, but he's also capable of this. Breathtaking, decisive, and frankly brutal violence when he's defending innocent people. So, okay, let's unpack this. Let's try to figure out what forces are driving this functional, dangerous, and deeply mysterious man.
To really get a handle on Jim Ironheart, you have to understand that he's not operating on his own schedule. He's running on this irresistible internal mandate. So we have to start where that compulsion begins.
In Southern California, right?
Right, the searing August heat. Our sources describe this scene in the supermarket parking lot. Jim is leaning against his car, and he feels pale, off balance. A good Samaritan comes up to him, concerned, and he puts on this, ghastly grimace to reassure her he's okay.
But inside, he's not okay at all.
Not at all. Inside, something shifts. That inner certainty hits him, that terrifying, undeniable voice that just says, gotta go.
Just like that, no details.
No details. He doesn't know where, he doesn't know why. All he knows is that time is short. So he grabs a suitcase, throws in 2 changes of clothes. And this is a key detail. He's fully aware that these missions, these adventures, whatever in God's name they usually don't take more than 2 or 3 days.
So it's a very specific clock he's on. High intensity, short duration.
Exactly. It's a pattern.
Yeah.
So he starts driving almost on autopilot to John Wayne Airport in Santa Ana. And the setting itself is important here, I think. It reinforces this feeling of, urgency and desperation.
How so?
Well, it's described as these parched hills, stark water conservation billboards. This constant reminder of the desert just waiting to reclaim everything. And he goes to the destination monitor, scans the names, and one just catches fire in his mind. Portland, Oregon.
And he just books it, no hesitation.
Instantly. Gets on the plane, and he's not nervous about flying. That's not the fear. He is terrified of the destination. Or, more specifically, whatever form of death is waiting for him there.
And his arrival in Portland, it just immediately shows us the nature of this clairvoyance, this ticking clock he lives with.
Right. While the woman who will eventually become his investigator, Thorne, is just a few blocks away struggling with her own career crisis, Jim is already on the scene. He's scanning a neighborhood school. He knows with absolute certainty death was nearer. It was almost among them.
That's a chilling thought.
It is. He's watching these kids boarding yellow school vans, but his perception of reality is already warping. He sees shadows lengthening, distorting, and that's when the terrifying countdown begins. He has less than 2 minutes.
And it just ticks down.
Ticks down. Then 50 seconds. He just drops his suitcase right there on the sidewalk, knowing it's just useless weight, and he starts running toward an intersection. At 20 seconds, he knows the precise street corner. That is the killing ground.
And he knows who the victims will be.
At 14 seconds, yes.
Whoa.
He sees the 4 children who are about to step out into that danger zone.
That level of precision is it's staggering. It's not a vague hunch. It's a real-time, high-definition map of a catastrophe about to happen.
And at 8 seconds, he gets the full picture, the full prophetic glimpse. The instrument of death is a drunk driver in a truck, rocketing up the far side with the accelerator jammed to the floorboard. He doesn't have time to process the horror of it. He only has time to act.
And he knows shouting is the wrong move.
Right. Shouting could panic the kid, make him run right into the truck's path. So his action has to be silent and physically perfect. The target is a boy named Billy Jenkins, the marked child.
And the sources describe the rescue itself in this really poetic way.
They do. It's described as executing a dream-slow swan dive off a high cliff. He just launches himself, rolls the boy into the gutter, out of harm's way.
But there's a cost to that precision, to that action.
A heavy cost. The truck's bumper catches his left foot. He feels this white-hot current of pain shoot up his leg. His shoe is completely torn off, and his ankle is wrenched. The description is, it's painfully specific, exploding like a 4th of July bottle rocket.
I mean, that's a severe injury. That would incapacitate most people.
Absolutely. Yet, Jim insists on leaving before the media shows up. He just limps away, only pausing later to even acknowledge the pain. And even with that severe limp, he manages to move with this unusual, almost unnatural grace.
What's so fascinating psychologically there is that it wasn't random. It was directed. The compulsion gave him the where and the when, but the execution that required this near superhuman focus and sacrifice.
Exactly. His body is clearly running on something far beyond normal adrenaline. It's why he can pull off that swan dive with such perfect, measured timing despite the insane urgency. He is, for all intents and purposes, a human weapon, but one that is constantly breaking down from the psychic and physical strain.
And that breakdown, it becomes much more pronounced, and the stakes get so much higher when his next mission guides him to the Mojave Desert.
Yes. Here the mission shifts entirely. It's no longer about preventing an accident. Now he's confronting active, malevolent human evil.
So what happens? He's just driving.
He's driving along and spots a stolen Camaro and then a big Road King motorhome. He pulls over next to a derelict Chevy station wagon, and inside he finds a man, dying. He's been shot twice in the chest.
And the man tells him what happened.
He can't. He can only whisper 3 names. Lisa, Susie. And Jim's reaction is, it's not what you'd expect.
It's not just pity. He's instantly overwhelmed by sickness and this almost disabling sense of personal responsibility for this stranger's death. This is our first real clue about the profound self-hatred and guilt he carries. He believes he should have been there sooner.
Even though he just arrived, it's completely irrational.
It's the core of his psychology. So he throws the Camaro in gear and just rockets across the scorching blacktop, chasing that Road King motorhome. And even from a distance, he's picking up on details that scream danger. There's a Harley-Davidson chained to the back, and he thinks that's not something a pair of retirees typically tools around on.
So he isn't just chasing criminals based on evidence. He's chasing a feeling, a powerful one. The source says what overwhelms him, beyond just suspicion, is a chilling sense of evil so strong that it might as well have been a black tide washing over him with all the power of the sea behind it.
And the confrontation, I'm guessing, gets violent very quickly.
Very quickly. The Road King swerves, bashes his smaller car twice, intentionally running him off the blacktop onto the shoulder. Jim barely avoids a rollover, crashes the Camaro, and has to get out and retrieve his shotgun.
The violence that comes next it's described as pretty brutal.
It is, and I think that's intentional. He tracks the kidnappers, corners one inside the motorhome. For a second, he's blinded by the sun and the killer fires, showering Jim with wood splinters. Jim returns fire, 2 rounds, slams the man against the rear wall. He ends up killing 2 men in total.
And this is the psychological crux of it, right? This is lethal, justified force. But Jim is a man who, at his core, seems to hate violence.
He abhors it,
Yeah.
which makes what he finds inside the rear bedroom of that motorhome even more horrifying for him.
He finds Lisa and Susie.
Lisa and Susie Jawalski bound and gagged. But it's the environment, the room itself, that adds this next layer of trauma. The walls and the ceiling are papered with obscene child pornography photos.
Oh, that's horrific.
And Jim's reaction is just visceral. The sources describe it with agonizing clarity. He fixates on Susie, who's 10 years old. She's described as having these luminous green eyes and skin as flawless as the membranous interior surface of an eggshell. To him, she's an embodiment of innocence, goodness, and purity, an angel cast down into a cesspool.
And his rage at the men who did this it's just off the charts.
It is, but it's compounded by this profound, agonizing self-awareness. He feels a crazy urge to empty a few more shotgun rounds into the dead men. And crucially, he realizes that the room itself, the photos on the wall, they constitute an ongoing assault.
So when he frees them,
When he frees the mother and child, he refuses to touch Susie himself. He believes the crime was somehow the responsibility of all men, and that at least a small stain of guilt was his as well.
wow. That's an immense, almost debilitating sense of collective responsibility.
It confirms the level of his internalized guilt. He believes that only her dead father should be the one to touch her. This is a man whose psyche is so finely tuned to guilt and morality that even in the aftermath of a righteous, heroic rescue, he is punishing himself. He's not just fighting evil out there, he is fighting his own sense of complicity in all of human failure.
Then after this draining, violent mission, he's guided onward again.
Yes. He ditches the stolen Harley in the middle of the Mojave and just collapses, completely depleted, on the steps of a church called Our Lady of the Desert. He's found unconscious by the priest, Father Geary, suffering from severe heat stroke.
But the priest sees something more, doesn't he?
He does. He sees something the medical staff completely misses. As Jim is being tended to, the priest clearly sees the signs of stigmata.
Stigmata, you mean like the wounds of the crucifixion?
Exactly. Wounds on his hands and feet and an inflamed scar on his side, what might have been a spear wound. These signs suggest an intense spiritual or psychological burden that is physically manifesting on Jim's body.
And then they just disappear.
They vanish quickly. But the priest knows what he saw. He knows he didn't imagine them. And this pushes Jim's ability past simple clairvoyance and into something truly mystical. Or perhaps a form of psychokinesis that's turned inward, his body literally manifesting the wounds of the suffering he's trying to prevent.
And even after all that, after collapsing with mystical wounds in the desert, he's still on the clock.
He is terrified. He tells the priest almost frantically, if I don't get to Boston, someone there is going to be killed. Someone who shouldn't die. He doesn't know who, only that he has to be there by tomorrow. The missions, the violence, the injuries, the stigmata. It all points to Jim Ironheart being a human instrument, pulled by forces he barely understands, driving him across the country in this suicidal fury to stop specific, malevolent deaths.
So we have this man, barely functioning, driven by premonitions and literally bleeding from invisible wounds. But it took someone outside of that immediate chaos, a cynical, clear-eyed reporter, to connect all these scattered, highly improbable events into a terrifying statistical pattern. And this is where Holly Thorne enters the story.
Holly Thorne is absolutely the necessary objective lens for this whole story. She's introduced as a bitter cynic, a woman with a damp wad of compassion who had spent her career kind of spiraling downward through 3 major newspapers. Now she's at the humble Portland Press.
And she's struggling with her integrity as a journalist.
Deeply. She prefers balanced, factual reporting, but that's not what sells papers. What sells is colorful bias, and her refusal to play that game has, ironically, really hurt her career. She's sick of writing industry puff pieces. She's ready to quit. She is, in short, perfectly primed for an investigation that defies all logic, but is anchored entirely in data.
And the Boston rescue of Nikki O'Connor, that's the trigger for her.
It's the trigger. The news hits her desk, and she's struck by the description. This modest stranger from Southern California who smelled burning insulation and knew exactly what was about to happen. It's just like the story she ignored back in Portland.
So she starts digging.
The trail is 9.5 hours old, and she starts digging, using the vast NewsWeb data services. This is where Holly really transforms from a cynical reporter into like a forensic investigator.
So what does she search for?
She tells NewsWeb to scan for the past 3 months, looking for Jim within 10 words of rescue or save the life. When that proves too narrow, she expands the search parameters, even resorting to key identifying features like blue eyes, which was mentioned in some of the initial reports.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because the data she uncovers is it's statistically unbelievable.
It is. She finds 14 documented rescues over just 6 months, from May 15th to August 23rd, stretching all across the continental, U.S. Atlanta, New York, San Francisco, Houston, Seattle, Peoria, you name it.
But it's not just the number of rescues, it's the type of rescues. This is the crucial statistical anomaly that just leaps out at her.
This is the deep dive central data point. In the United States, way more people die each year in traffic accidents or random household accidents than they do at the hands of another person. The ratio of accidental death to homicide is massive.
Right.
Yet Holly's analysis shows that Jim Ironheart intervened in 8 of those 14 cases that had been homicides or other deliberate acts of violence. That's over 60% of his rescues were for murder.
Hold on, let's just stop there for a second. That completely defies all statistical probability. If Jim were just, a general clairvoyant responding to the vibe of death, the vast majority of his rescues should be from car crashes, fires, random falls.
Of course.
But this intense focus on murder, it suggests his power isn't general precognition, it's targeted. It's targeted specifically at stopping malevolent human intention.
Precisely. Holly realizes that psychic is just an inadequate word here. This is something else. It's like sorcery, but focused specifically on preventing the darkest expressions of the human spirit.
So it's Jim's own moral framework, probably driven by his trauma, that's defining the scope of his power.
Yes. He is seeking out the worst forms of human cruelty because that, for him, is the source of his profound internalized guilt.
And while she's digging into this, she's also trying to find out who he is. He claimed to be a Southern California college graduate, but his life seems unlisted.
Completely. No phone, no easy paper trail. She does learn that his surname, Ironheart, is the anglicized version of the German Eisenherz.
Which literally means Ironheart, a very fitting name for a man whose mind has built this unbreakable defensive shell around his trauma.
But she also uncovers something else that's critical: the intense preparation he undertook. This suggests his heroics were rooted in physical dedication, not just, psychic whims.
Wait, so he's not just spontaneously gifted, he's trained for this. Like, he's trained to be a one-man army.
That's exactly it. Her interviews reveal that Jim spent 7 or 8 months training in Taekwondo, and his instructor noted he was excellent, good enough to be a competitor. He took a 2-week course in aggressive driving, the kind taught to chauffeurs for politicians, diplomats. And he had extensive weapons training: revolver, pistols, rifles, shotguns.
Okay, this is critical for the psychological framing. He wasn't training to meet some future threats he foresaw. He was trying to rationalize his power. He was building a human weapon capable of fulfilling this completely irrational, trauma-driven mandate he felt.
Yes. As one source told her, he was clearly preparing for a war. This is the profile of a man trying to physically manufacture the competence his psychic compulsion demanded of him. He felt he needed to be physically infallible to match his infallible premonitions.
That makes perfect sense. He's trying to fit this massive irrational power into a rational physical box. But the training isn't the origin of the missions, the trauma is.
And Holly tracks that trauma down. She finds Jim's friend, Viola Moreno, who reveals his background as a dedicated teacher. He quit after one of his students, a very bright but disturbed 8th grader named Larry Kokonis, committed suicide.
And Jim blamed himself.
Completely. Larry felt responsible for his troubled home life, and Jim, a man with an extreme sense of responsibility to begin with, just took all of that blame onto himself for not seeing it, for not stopping it.
And Viola says his reaction was excessive.
Excessive, even for Jim. Larry's death, this avoidable tragedy, it just brought all of Jim's buried rage to the surface. Rage at fate, at destiny, at the fragility of the human species, rage at God even.
But is it really excessive rage? Or is it a proportionate response from someone who realizes, maybe subconsciously, that he had this immense unused power? Maybe he felt he could have sensed Larry's despair and intervened.
That's a great point. His response was to transform himself into the Ironheart persona, a weapon of fate, to fight back at fate. It's this moment of severe mental distress, bordering on a complete break, that precedes his very first recorded rescue. Sam and Emily Newsom in Atlanta, Georgia on May 15th, exactly 1 year after Larry's death.
So he took this colossal trauma, channeled it through his latent psychic power, and wrapped the whole thing in a self-made action hero persona.
Creating a functional, life-saving lunatic. Holly now knows his history, she knows his pattern, and she has to find out what mechanism he's using to rationalize his power to himself.
Which takes us out of the realm of police files and data searches, and into the realm of pure science fiction. Holly finally tracks Jim down after his latest mission as he returns to his only known property, his inheritance, Ironheart Farm.
Ironheart Farm is this modest but incredibly symbolic place. A farmhouse, a pond, and a mysterious, dilapidated limestone windmill that Jim immediately recognizes as his childhood retreat. The whole setting is less a home and more a stage, a stage set for the psychological drama that Jim has unconsciously constructed for himself.
And he's eager to go straight to the mill, right? It's the epicenter of his childhood memory and his fear.
Immediately. This is where the fantasy setup begins. When they get inside the dusty, cavernous mill, Jim mentions hearing a ringing sound there 25 years ago. And then suddenly, the ringing returns.
A bell sound.
A melodic bell sound, yes. And the limestone walls of the mill begin to pulse with this throbbing colored light. Red, orange, red, muddy orange. It's a completely overwhelming sensory experience designed to convince both Jim and Holly of its unearthly origin.
And when the light and sound stop, he feels compelled to do something very specific.
He places a lined yellow tablet on the floor between them. This sets up the communication method. Jim writes a question, and the answer just appears magically on the tablet, as if it were being pulled through water.
And this entity, which Jim calls the friend, introduces itself with these incredibly grand, almost pretentious claims.
Oh, absolutely. Jim asks where it comes from. The answer? Another world, he asks. Another galaxy. The entity replies yes to both. It claims its vessel is hidden under the pond and that it has been observing humanity for 10,000 years.
And its mission is to help mankind.
To observe, to study, to help mankind, using Jim as its chosen instrument to shade human destiny.
And it tries to prove this by explaining the rescues.
Yes, it offers these specific, elaborate explanations. It's rationalizing Jim's actions back to him. For example, Carmen Diaz's child, who Jim saved, will now grow up to become president of the United States. Amanda Cutter's child will be a great peacemaker.
Hold on, if this thing is truly an ancient, vast intelligence that's shaping human destiny, why does it sound like a plot from a bad daytime soap opera? I mean, it feels entirely too convenient, too neat.
That is precisely Holly's professional cynicism kicking in, and it's what ultimately saves her and Jim. She finds the answers cliched and too easy. She notes that the entity is structuring the entire encounter like an old movie or TV script, specifically something right out of The Outer Limits.
So Jim is completely swept away by the wonder and the validation of it all, but Holly's, her nose for deception is twitching. She recognizes the tropes immediately.
She sees immediate signs of psychological instability in this supposed superintelligence. It fluctuates wildly between what's described as syrupy goodwill and sullen anger. When Jim asks the very reasonable question of why it waited 10,000 years to intervene, the entity gets pouty, refuses to answer, and just announces, "I am going now."
And when Holly challenges its claims?
It resorts to pure pettiness, it writes. Is this adversarial journalism? That is not the response of a superior alien being. That is the response of a very human ego that's been deeply wounded by criticism.
It betrays a thin-skinned, immature intelligence.
Completely. And Holly seizes on these inconsistencies. She asks a seemingly innocuous question that the friend completely refuses to answer. The tablet just stays blank. She asks, "Why is your approach marked by the sound of bells?"
That's a huge question. If this entity can travel between galaxies and communicate through magic writing, why would it panic and stonewall on the source of a simple sound effect?
Because, as Holly is beginning to realize, the intelligence isn't receiving information from outside. It's projecting a narrative from deep within Jim's subconscious. And the inconsistency suggests that the intelligence is, well, it's less than perfect. It's deeply wounded. It's hiding its true nature behind a comforting, familiar sci-fi story. The bells have to be tied to a painful, repressed human memory that Jim's consciousness has successfully blocked, and the friend will not touch it.
As they reluctantly decide to stay in the mill for the night, the experience turns much darker.
Much darker, confirming Holly's suspicion of a deep schism in this intelligence. Both Jim and Holly share a terrifying, identical nightmare of the mill. A sensory overload of rhythmic creaking, a whooshing blade sound, a damp limestone smell, and a hostile presence they both immediately recognize as the enemy.
And when the friend returns, it's afraid.
It's terrified of its own dark side. It issues a dire warning. Do not sleep. Dreams are doorways.
Yeah.
If they try to leave the mill, they will die. The friend is losing control of the psychological box that Jim created.
But the most shocking, the most terrifying revelation is the one that's written only for Holly.
Yes. When she picks up the answer tablet after the friend has departed, she finds pages filled with two alternating, chilling, unpunctuated statements written over and over.
He loves you, Holly. He will kill you, Holly.
This is the definitive proof of the schism. The benevolent, loving side, the friend, recognizes Holly as a partner, a source of strength. But the enemy, the dark, murderous, self-hating side of Joe's psyche, recognizes Holly as the ultimate threat to the fantasy, to the repression that keeps Jim functional. It is threatening to murder the one person Jim now relies on. The psychological box is breaking open and the monster is ready to get out.
So Holly's hypothesis just crystallizes right there. The alien isn't an alien at all. It's a manifestation of Jim's own split consciousness.
Exactly. The friend is the heroic, benevolent ego that Jim needed to invent to survive and to act. The enemy is the murderous dark side, representing all his repressed self-hatred and his rage at fate.
She realizes she can't just rely on these theatrical displays in the mill anymore. She has to use the subconscious keys that Jim provided during their drive to unlock his actual past.
And the first stop is at the local librarian, Mrs. Glynn, who remembers Jim vividly.
Yeah.
Mrs. Glynn assumes, like Jim believes, that his parents died in a car accident, and she starts talking about his quiet nature as a boy.
But the reality comes out, and it's devastating.
It's devastatingly clear. Jim's parents were not killed in a car accident. They were victims of a mass murder. 24 people dead at a nightclub lunch break in Atlanta. And Jim, who was only 10 years old, was the only survivor.
And his grandfather, Henry, later fills in the horrifying detail.
Yes. He tells Holly that the police found little Jim in his daddy's lap, in his daddy's arms, all covered with his daddy's blood.
My God, to be the sole survivor of that, covered in your own father's blood, a witness to the absolute worst kind of random human cruelty. It's no wonder his mind invented an entire reality to cope.
It's almost beyond endurance for a child. He felt responsible, he hated himself, and he locked it all away.
And crucially, Mrs. Glynn, the librarian, confirms that Jim was already psychically gifted before this trauma.
Yes. By age 6, he could move a penny just by wanting it to move. By age 10, he could float a cake tin. This proves the power was innate. It wasn't a reaction to the trauma, though the trauma clearly amplified it and defined how he would use it.
So this inherent, terrifying power, combined with a catastrophic trauma, meant his mind needed an external explanation just to survive the guilt.
And Holly finds that explanation in the library. She finds the source code for his entire fantasy.
Huh.
A popular science fiction novel that Jim read as a boy called The Black Windmill.
And the discovery is, it's the ultimate psychological mic drop. The parallels are exact and just breathtaking.
They're a one-to-one match. The book's plot features a main character named Jim Jameson who lives on a farm with a pond and an old windmill. He discovers an alien who is named the Friend in a spacecraft under the pond.
And it communicates using 2 lined yellow tablets with answers appearing magically.
And it instructs Jim to save a candidate for the U.S. presidency because he will be a great statesman and peacemaker. And at the end, the alien tells Jim to forget the whole encounter, to remember it only as a dream.
So Jim's entire 25-year mission, the communication method, the terminology, the grandiosity of the rescues, the specific mission statements, it was all literally ripped from the pages of a paperback book he read when he was 10.
And then it was subconsciously weaponized by his immense trauma-fueled power as a defense mechanism. This isn't just denial. It's an entire fabricated reality built from a children's sci-fi story.
The depth of his denial is just staggering. Holly then drives him to the local cemetery. Jim is absolutely certain his grandparents died 5 years ago.
But the gravestone tells a different story. Lena Ironheart, his grandmother, died 24 years ago, only 1 year after his parents' massacre. And Henry Ironheart, his grandfather, has no death date chiseled on his stone at all. He's still alive.
This denial of reality is so strong, he has fabricated 5 years of his grandfather's life and erased 20 years of his grandmother's death.
The final missing pieces of this trauma puzzle are finally filled in at Fairhaven Nursing Home, where Henry is recovering from a stroke.
Henry is suffering from aphasia, which impairs his ability to communicate. He struggles to find the right words.
And the emotional context he provides is just heartbreaking. Henry reveals the truth of Lena's death. She fell down the mill stairs during a storm. Jim, who was already traumatized and spending more and more time in the mill, was found upstairs mute near where she fell.
And Henry, who was, as he says, grief crazy
Over the loss of his daughter and son-in-law the year before, he wrongly accused Jim of pushing her down the stairs.
So Jim, already burdened by his parents' deaths and his massive, confusing psychic power, just blocked the entire event. He replaced it with the alien fantasy to deal with the unbearable guilt of being blamed for his grandmother's death.
And the bells he heard in the mill as a child. They were likely the physical bells on the farm, ringing during the storm, marking the exact moment of his grandma's fatal fall.
And Henry's final revelation is the most agonizing piece of all.
It is. He confirms Jim's latent psychokinesis, moving objects with his mind. And he confesses his most recent guilt. When Jim returned for the first time in 13 years, Henry had just suffered his stroke, which gave him aphasia. The wrong words kept coming out.
So Jim, who is already psychologically fragile and primed for blame, misinterpreted Henry's stroke-induced sounds as a delayed final accusation of murder.
He fled, convinced his grandfather still believed he was a killer. The friend-enemy fantasy was Jim's psychological box, this elaborate construct built to handle the guilt, the terrifying power, and the overwhelming fear of his own madness and his capacity for destruction. If he was the friend, he couldn't possibly be the killer his grandfather accused him of being.
Holly knows they're running out of time. Jim's denial is crumbling, and the dark side, the enemy, is fighting back violently against the truth.
They return to Henry at the nursing home, and that repressed rage finally materializes into something physical.
A terrifying manifestation of pure internal darkness. An immense flock of blackbirds, maybe 50 or 60 of them, churning and dark, hungry and quick, shrieking demonically, determined to attack Jim.
This flock is the enemy. It's the physical embodiment of all of Jim's self-hatred and murderous rage, directed entirely at his own consciousness for surviving and for what he believes was his role in his grandmother's death.
And Holly realizes that just telling him the truth won't be enough. She needs to do something more, an act of sacrificial love to break the spell.
She leaps up, makes herself a target, and shields Jim from the attacking birds. She holds his face in her hands, peering into his beautiful blue eyes, which are now described as icy, with a cold fire of self-hatred.
And she confronts him directly, screaming the truth that he so desperately needs to hear. You are the power, not God or some alien under the millpond.
She professes her love for him, grounding him in a real human connection, and pulls him back from the ultimate destructive path. She reminds him of Larry Kokonis, his student who died by suicide, threatening to take the same path herself if Jim gives up and dies.
It's this act of sacrificial love facing down these cold and uncaring eyes of beasts of prey with pure tenderness. That's the key that finally shatters the psychological box.
As Holly holds him and softly repeats his name, the immense, dark flock of blackbirds just vanishes, instantly, as if they were never there. The enemy, unable to withstand the truth and the acceptance of love, dissipates into nothing.
And Jim just slides off the bench, onto his knees in front of Henry. He takes his grandfather's withered hand and kisses it. The reconciliation with his grandfather and with his own past breaks the final psychological lock. He finally accepts the power and the trauma at the same time.
He finally realizes the ultimate truth. He is the source. The clairvoyance, the self-healing we saw in his rapid recovery from the wrenched ankle, the entire 25-year fantasy. It was all him. It was a necessary, though extreme, psychological construct, a form of self-healing that manifested as socially helpful behavior until reality was finally forced upon him.
And the path forward is acceptance. Jim and Holly commit to a future together, embracing the mission, but now grounded in a shared reality. Holly, who found her own capacity for righteous rage against injustice during all this, now sees her purpose as standing beside him, wrestling with God against death.
And Jim, accepting his role as this human powerhouse, no longer afraid of his own internal capabilities, recognizes that this mission needs two people now. He tells Holly she has to learn martial arts, learn how to handle a gun, and he concludes with this powerful declaration of their future. The world hasn't seen anything like us, kid. They're moving forward as conscious partners in an ongoing war against tragedy, powered by a love that conquered madness.
So, at the end of the day, the story is fundamentally about the transformation of trauma into purpose. Jim Ironheart is a man of vast, unquantifiable psychic ability, clairvoyance, self-healing, maybe even limited psychokinesis. But his heroic journey wasn't really about saving strangers.
No, it was a lifelong, subconscious struggle to reclaim that terrifying power from the comforting, fictional defense mechanism he had to create in the wake of catastrophic trauma.
The central conflict here, the real deep dive, is into the human mind dealing with unbearable guilt. His power was so immense, so inexplicable that his mind chose to invent an alien external source, the friend, just to maintain sanity and function in the world.
He externalized his capacity for good and his capacity for evil into the friend and the enemy. And that's what allowed him to operate as this functional, socially helpful lunatic, until Holly Thorne, fueled by facts and by love, forced him to face the truth of his own terrible yet benevolent power.
And it's really important to appreciate the artistic courage behind this whole narrative. Dean Koontz, the author, he's recounted fighting back against film executives who insisted that they should make the alien in the pond real for dramatic effect.
Right, because that would be the easier, more Hollywood story.
Exactly. But Koontz insisted that the true power of the narrative was entirely in the human themes. The power of love, of hope, and the profound human response to tragedy. It wasn't about a cheap sci-fi gimmick. The true spectacle was always Jim's mind, just struggling to reconcile his enormous internal power with his agonizing external guilt.
Which leaves us with a truly provocative thought, I think. If Jim's immense psychic power, his ability to see the future, to heal his own body, was born entirely out of profound, life-shattering trauma, what unimaginable power might reside dormant in all of us, locked away behind our own psychological fences, just waiting for the right trauma or maybe the right love to unlock it?